This week in Pure Reinvention.
There's so much stuff happening that I feel like we're not telling it fast enough. That's why we do 2 full half hours on Detroit every season.
Episode 59. Tom Daldin and Jim Edelman from the Emmy Award-winning PBS show Under the Radar, Michigan, Part 2.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where our mission is to create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. This episode is sponsored by Willpower Consulting. We want to thank our friend Will Carlson and the wonderful work he does to produce these podcasts for the wonderful sponsorship. Thank you, Will. For those of you that are interested in sponsoring, please get a hold of us and we'll see if we can work something out. Misty, Part 2 was just as exciting as Part 1. I'm telling you, we've got to warn our listeners right away that these podcasts between Tom and Jim are a little bit longer than what we really had committed we were going to do in the new year.
But we couldn't help ourselves.
The content is so good. We believe the opportunity to learn is so great. So here's a thought. If going in, you know, the podcasts are going to be a little bit long and you need to cut them into your own 15-minute segments just so that you can kind of sip and savor them rather than kind of drink out of the entire fire hose, give that some thought, because you certainly could kind of cut them in half and listen to parts, because there's a lot of really good content here, Misty.
And these guys do a great job of adding a lot of comedic value, but adding in the lessons. And that's why it was a pleasure to talk to them and a pleasure to learn from them.
Absolutely. And I want to kick off one of the lessons that I picked up, which was the pace of change is happening faster and faster and faster. And they were very quick to recognize that.
And they're the guys on the ground, so they see it a lot. They, as you'll hear in the interview, spend a lot of time in Detroit and cover so many businesses and so many people, and there's still more to cover. They keep learning. And so I would, if anybody, believe these two, because they are there experiencing
Well, I think what's amazing is this pair moves pretty fast.
Oh, yeah.
And for them to say that the pace of change is happening even faster and faster suggests that if your business or the way you are approaching things has really fallen into a rut, you really need to take a look at that, because I think if we were to insulate ourselves, we might not see the pace of change as great as it's becoming, but everybody's reporting that this pace is really picking up. So I think that means within our own businesses, we really have to understand that trend.
That's so true. Listen for how they have learned as they've grown in this podcast. They share a lot of anecdotal stuff, but I think that you can internalize it and learn from the lessons they're sharing about what they've done.
Misty, I think that's absolutely right. I think one of the areas where we will never be able to do enough good work is in listening to our customers. We have to always do a really good job of listening to our customers, because that's what they're telling us is you've got to listen to your marketplace. You got to kind of listen to what's happening around you. And here's why that's really important. In this next phase that we're going into in business, it's going to be up to us to create this new conversation. And if you're going to create a new conversation for your business, which means a new outcome, you have to do it with the core being what your customers need. And that comes from listening to your customers.
Awesome. Are you ready to listen to the next part of this interview?
I am. Let's go.
How do you guys view Detroit, and what can you learn from the city?
There's so much stuff happening that I feel like we're not telling it fast enough. That's why we do 2 full half hours on Detroit every season. Having spent time working downtown and seeing what's happened just in that 15 years, I love it. I absolutely love what's happening.
Yeah, from doing the program, I mean, my daughter goes to Wayne State University, and she lives downtown. She's got an apartment downtown Detroit. I say that to some people. They're like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe you let your daughter live down there. You know, before I started doing this program, I probably would have said the same thing. But now that we've been down to Detroit so much, we met so many incredible, inspired, creative, talented, wonderful people doing great things. And the comeback, the turnaround's happening faster and faster every year. That now I love the fact that my daughter lives down there. She's my urban girl. She loves multiple cultures. She loves diversity. She loves the city. And she's having the time of her life down there. So I love the fact that she's down there. She's helping keep me connected. The show we're learning so much about, the people down there that it's mind-boggling how fast it's happening right now.
I'll throw this in there because, you can't lose sight of how big of a city Detroit is. The fact that Boston, Manhattan, and San Francisco can all fit in our footprint. That is going to take a lot of time to fill in those spaces. So I think what we're seeing, that growth we're seeing in Midtown, that growth we're seeing in Corktown, in downtown, that's all fantastic. But when that starts leaking out and that's the stuff in between is getting filled out, the M1 rail, where that's stopping, is going to just bring a lot of development to Boston, Edison, and beyond. What we saw with Hamtramck and how that expanded to the outlying neighborhoods, that's exciting.
In the Cranes report just recently, where the major Detroit news publishers have gone through some dramatic reorganization with a lot of early retirements. Right. They're looking at how they can create new models. And so that's in response to the current way we are digesting news. But more importantly, I think they're trying to align with this new way that, Tom, you're describing the new residents of Detroit and how they want to consume their news. And it's dramatic.
Yeah.
How are you using that phenomena?
I think, when you look at different ways we tell stories now, for us, it was the show at first. And then we expanded to conversations happening inside social media. We added a blog this year. We added a newsletter, longer form, different type of conversations, different type of communications. We've talked about, doing a podcast in our cars while driving to different places. So this is kind of a neat experiment, is just, we know that when we get in the car, we rarely turn on the radio. If we do, it's because, we're on the way home.
Or we had a fight. Or we had a fight. We're not talking.
And that, again, was on the way home, though. That one fight we had was a silent fight. It was silent but deadly. But it was, and I peppered it on the way home with just picking out songs that had talk in the title.
Yeah, none of us were talking. It's too funny.
That could make for a really long car ride.
And that, luckily, it was just coming back from the west side of the state, so it was only a 2-hour drive. But yeah, coming back from Marquette with no talking.
So what I heard that what you were talking about, though, is that there is no right one answer. That what I heard you say is you have multiple ways in which you're going to try and touch multiple audiences. Oh, yeah. And that's got to be a key to most businesses.
Yeah, one of the neat things that Jim always brings up, and it's true, our Facebook followers are so loyal and so engaged in the show that Jim will throw something up on Facebook for discussion, and before you know it, there's all these people are talking to each other. They're not even talking to us anymore. They're talking to each other. So we start these dialogues, and people are chiming in and talking and sharing and comparing. And you can't do that with a TV show.
But what I'm hearing is you've engaged them.
Yes.
They have absolutely engaged in whatever the form, whether it's Facebook, whether it's this, that, or the other thing. You really have found that passionate way in which you've put a product out has engaged them in a way that's made them own your show.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something true, that ownership. People feel so connected to the show that they take it upon themselves to tell people about the show. And I think that's really where, we'll see this when people share items from our page. Hey, they'll tag so-and-so in their posts. Hey, Mary, this is that show I was telling you about. You need to watch it. And that impact that we're having outside of the state. This is something where you got a lot of Michigan expats who are spread around the country, around the world, who tune in to our show to kind of get that taste of home. Emily Gale, if you remember her from the 70s and 80s, she was the Say Nice Things About Detroit lady. So someone sent her a promo to our Detroit show saying, hey, these are some guys doing great stuff about Detroit. So all of a sudden, this is this blast from the past, this person who was so engaged in Detroit at a time when it was really hard to be engaged in Detroit. This is when the Cass Corridor was the Cass Corridor, and it was dangerous.
It was not a friendly place.
No, but she was such a booster, and the fact that she is now kind of she sees this passing of the baton in a way, and there's no shortage of people saying great things about Michigan right now. There's anyone with a computer, anyone with a blog post is saying positive things. It's just how your audience is digesting it. We seem to have this massive audience, and we never lose sight of how lucky we are that there's people who want to hear what we're saying.
How do you respect that massive audience that you have created?
I think it's just by making them part of the process. We're not just talking to them. They're talking. I mean, we get some of our best, most creative ideas for segments from our viewers.
Well, after us, from our viewers.
Yeah, right. So it's almost like they're all helping produce the program. So we respect their ideas, their input. It's funny, the Facebook page is so crazy right now that it's hard to keep up. But every email that comes in, I answer. I sit down every morning and I respond to every email because if somebody's going to take the time to email me and say, hey, I like this, or have you been here, or have you thought about featuring this? They deserve a response.
Well, but I like that thought, which is you're respecting the fact that if they took the time to share with us, we're going to take the time to share back, and that you have respected that in many ways, a lot of your great content has come from their help in identifying what's next. So a company, in respecting their own marketplace, has to realize a lot of what's next for any company is not necessarily coming from corporate headquarters, but is coming from the marketplace and the people that are actually consuming the products.
You have to listen to your customers, your viewers, your fans, and make them part of your family. And then it becomes the synergy is just it's almost circular. It's like wax on, wax off.
The world peas.
Yes. What?
We push the point about connection a lot, that there's so many different ways to connect. It's not just about networking. Once you are exposed to different ideas and different people, you're able to connect ideas and people in new and different ways. And that's really a secret to reinvention, is being able to find those unlikely sources and put them together to make magic. Do you guys have any stories that come to mind about a time when it was like, how did we put these two things together? But wow, that was amazing.
I put my socks on this morning. That was amazing enough.
I'm amazed when they match. No, I think the Eastern Market story, I think is one of those things where we treated Eastern Market like a city instead of just a district, and connected different businesses within there. I think that was kind of an interesting thing. And then we used Dan Carmody to kind of bridge the gap to what was happening at the market, and then the businesses that were really erupting around that. That district could be twice as big, and it still wouldn't be big enough.
You're talking about connecting with your audience and listening to and respecting them. Somebody who does that really well, and I'm not bringing him up because he's a sponsor of the show, but Big B Coffee has really gotten good at connecting with his. It's almost not like they're customers; they're a fan base. They're part of and he's always communicating with them, and he's going to stores, and he's talking to people, and he's made them a part of the whole process.
That's Bob Fish, right?
Right, Bob Fish.
He has done a great job at that, and he's a shining example. And I think you guys are right there with him as far as engaging people, creating those conversations. Jim and I were on a road trip together, and we stopped and took a picture of an old schoolhouse. That was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw that picture.
Good, you finished.
Well, I was just going to say that after you posted that picture, I loved the conversation that was inspired by that.
Yes, and people sharing photos of houses that they had taken pictures of. That's that community that's been built around the show. It's not our community. It belongs to the people who contribute to it. We're a conduit.
Yeah, that's what's so great about technology. I hate to quote Kip from Napoleon Dynamite, but I love technology. It's 20 years ago, we couldn't have done what we're doing right now. But now it's just so, because I'm such a people person. I mean, like your typical Italian, they all live real close and they work real close. And when they go on vacation, they all go together. They all go to the same place and they're on top of each other. It's just like love connecting with people, and I think that's the most important thing you can do in your business is connecting with people. So,
do you believe you'll ever enter a time frame where you can't put different and new combinations together and continue to keep this energy you've created alive for a long, long time?
No.
100 years from now, we won't be able to do this.
It's funny. When we first started doing the show on the first season, a friend of mine said, "You're just doing a show about Michigan. What are you going to do after one season?" You wouldn't believe on my computer I have, because every suggestion that comes in for the show, I catalog. I've got files. You wouldn't believe all the wonderful things that people are doing that are under our radar that we don't know about. And I keep them all. And we have many production meetings where we discuss what we're going to do next.
So if a company were to come to you and say, we've run out of ideas, there's just no way we can continue to do what we're doing, you would have a hard time believing them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, actually, because there's always another turn you can take. I mean, I hate to use the phrase outside of the box because I don't think I was ever in a box. Nobody would ever put me in their box. But there's always something. Talk to people. Find out what they're thinking. Find out what people outside your group are thinking. There's always something extra you can do.
But in everything that you've described, it's going out. Go out, connect with someone else, go away from your traditional. All the energy you're putting into it is to suggest do not go inward, but go outbound.
I've always been a firm believer, and I've always been a firm believer that I'm never the smartest guy in the room, because with me it's actually true. But yes, I'm a firm believer in the group. And there's power in numbers of people and ideas. That's where your greatest ideas will come from. I used to work at a radio station where the GM would bring in the interns and let them be a part of the process, the creative process. It's not like, well, hey, we're the hot shots. We make the big money. We've got all the good ideas. No, some of the best ideas come from kids that are just, be abstract. Think outside of the envelope or over the box or whatever.
Out of the norm.
Yeah, thank you.
I like to say just think the box.
Right. Yeah. Just throw the
Or
box
rethink
out.
the box. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the good things that came out of, my radio years is that I went through a brainstorming facilitator training. So we did these weekly brainstorms, which actually were about how do you in radio reinvent what you're doing that takes into account all the different aspects of communication. So we did these weekly brainstorms. We actually brainstormed the process of Under the Radar's name when we were coming up with a name. And we did it on one of those painted chalkboard walls. Mm-hmm. I wish we would have taken a picture because there were probably some good names up there.
Oh, yeah, like hold my beer and watch this.
But I think that, that kind of looking at things and saying, okay, what's next? Well, let's make a list and let's expand upon that list. That's really the basis for brainstorming.
Which is really a cool thought, which is we never stop having a list.
And people keep adding things around us. That's the brilliance.
I mean, the list is going at such a rate that you may never get to even a fraction of. But for somebody to say there is no list, to you would suggest that you're just not focusing on listening for the list.
Well, what's so perfect about that is what we're doing is not original. This is a discovery show. The thing that's original is Tom's approach, Tom's humor, the way we cut it together, the way we move it faster than what is done on PBS. But I think, look at all the news stations in this state that could have done this. They have the resources. They just didn't have the talent. They didn't have the ability to look at things that weren't news gathered in that way. Repeat B-roll. Cut 20 seconds of B-roll and repeat it 3 times in the story because you're moving so fast that they've got, a lot of hours of news programming to fill. This show could have easily had its legs cut out from us when we came on that first season if someone at a station had said, hey, we can totally do that.
So in the early days, as you're creating from an unknown to a known, you probably worked very hard to make sure you were recognized.
Well, we're both very driven people. We wear many, many hats. People always say, well, where's your staff? How big's your staff? It's like, no, there's not. It's 3 guys, 2 cameras, 1 car. It's, but we're just, we're just very driven people.
No, and I think to add to that, that idea that, because we've talked about how do you get in other states? How do you franchise this? The hard thing is you need a salesperson that could shoot a camera. You need a director who can edit and music compose. I mean, he doesn't compose music, but he compiles the music. We are such an anomaly outside. I mean, the salespeople I know, I wouldn't let them touch the camera.
Right. And find a host who could write the show, produce the show, host the show.
Produce himself, so it's not all about you.
Right. It's I mean, if we were doing this in the normal fashion, there would be a staff. There'd be a whole staff of people doing this, but we're just so driven and so mentally hyperactive. We just do it all.
And we're so cheap that we can't afford to hire.
Well, there's that too.
There is that
too.
what you
You
have the budget to do.
Yeah, you do what you have to do.
Right. Now, what happens if we get to a budget standing, and we've talked about this, when our budget gets bigger, hopefully, with more sales, and we're on the verge right now of taking the show nationally. So they'll be under the radar America if the funding is there. So if that happens, we know that it can't be done the same way this show is being done right now. We're going to have to add some folks to it.
You're going to have to reinvent.
Exactly, and that communication.
I like that, though. I reinvent myself every 10 years. I've always done that.
And we talk about the bandwidth that we have. You know, you've only got X number of hours in the day. We like to see our families. Not imperative.
I'm not sure how much they want to see me.
But, you know, when you own a business, you're up at 6 a.m. and you don't go to bed until
The work is done.
Yeah, and it's fun, and this is fun work. So I think it's the first time that I've had no problem working a lot.
Yeah, I've worked harder and more on this show over the last 5 years than I've at any other job, but I've been more satisfied and I've enjoyed myself more at the same time.
You guys have both talked a lot about kind of learning as you go, having these multiple I was going to say personalities, but
That's
these
true.
multiple strengths that aren't necessarily connected.
Right.
Because you're a salesman that runs a video camera, Jim. How do you guys teach yourself things? How do you learn new things, and how do you stay hungry?
Well, it's funny. You're right. A lot of the stuff that we're doing now, when we started doing this, when we finally got the funding from Mishta was our first sponsor. I remember we got in the car and we said, well, now we got to actually figure out how to make a TV show. It's like, but you learn as you go. I remember when I was an intern in radio, my philosophy was just keep your mouth shut, learn as much as you can, and if they ask you if you can do something, say, yes, I can do it, and figure it out. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't feel afraid to try and figure. But so we learned the first 6 shows we did with a big production company. We went $150,000 in debt very quickly. So we said, this is not going to work, this business model. So Jim and I said to each other, you know what? We're going to buy 2 cameras. We're going to hire our friend Eric, who's a post-production producer, and we're going to do the next show ourselves.
In that shoot, we ended up blowing one segment because we had bad audio, but we figured it out.
And it makes really good outtakes too, right?
Yeah.
I wish we had good outtakes. We don't, because there's not a lot of.
We're moving so fast, and we actually have a very organized production plan for the day. That's what that's for my past from doing car commercials. So we've got, because we're moving quickly. We don't have the budget to lock down a location for 3 days and have lunch and craft services and make mistakes. We don't have that luxury.
Get to work.
We have a day to do a city. We do it in a day. Yeah. So there aren't that many outtakes.
Well, I think it's because it's not a scripted item that you're dealing with someone, you're acting against someone. That's where you get a lot of great outtakes. What we end up with, our outtakes end up in the end credits, which are just behind the scenes stuff. So a lot of times Eric's he's the third leg in our tripod. He and I will find situations that each of us are in, like, as camera people, that we'll be shooting and try to, like there's a really bad shot of me at the Lugnut Stadium in 104-degree temperature with sweat in places that I never thought I could sweat. Doing the chicken dance.
Doing the chicken dance. Yeah, that got in the show. That's one of my favorite moments ever.
I have to look that one up.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that one of your pieces of advice, people going through reinvention, is say yes and learn as you go, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to learn on the fly. One of the things that I'm beginning to learn is that Under the Radar is like a reality TV show. Part of what people want is to go with you on this journey, which means it's not supposed to be perfect. In fact, if it was too perfect, the story wouldn't be right. And I think in so many ways we expect everything in business that we do is to be perfect, when most people just want to understand the passion, want to understand the story, and want to go on the journey, which you guys have done an incredible job with.
That means I appreciate it. Yeah, it really is true reality TV, because we're talking to real people about what they really do and why they really love where they live and what they do. Really? I'm not slick enough to be perfect, so I don't look perfect. I don't talk too good. I don't talk perfect. So I'm just a real regular guy that's talking to real people about what they do and what they love.
Right.
And it's that simple. If we try to slick it up or make it too perfect, then it becomes, then it's like we're trying to sell something. We're not trying to sell anything. We're just trying to tell real stories.
You're trying to sell that book?
No, actually, it's funny because I was going to say that
We have a book?
When the book came up, when we wrote the book, which is the first 50 episodes in book form, I look at this. It's a yearbook, is what this is. This is not. It's a way that people can take us in their glove box in their car and write down. People will show up at book signings with the book, and there's notes written in the margins. There's circles. There's highlights. There's Post-it notes jammed. They're like it is a
travelogue.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like it totally is a textbook.
Well, it says on the front, it says The Adventures of Tom Daldin, Jim Edelman, and Eric Tremonti, because it really is. It's the first 50 shows, and it takes you through our adventures and who we met, what we ate, where we went, what we did. And people are buying this. Well, we were halfway into the first season of the show, and people were saying, "When are you going to come out with a book?" And we finally did.
So where can people buy your book?
I don't know.
Boy, I think right now it's at Costco, at Barnes and Noble. A lot of independent stores have it. It's on our website, utrmichigan.com.
But if you're going to buy the book, buy it from an independent bookstore, because we have a no chain policy on the show. We don't feature chains in the show unless they're a Michigan chain. And again, nothing against Amazon, nothing against Barnes and Noble. They've treated us really well, and we've done some really great book signings at those locations. But in the spirit of the show, the independent bookstores, they go out of their way.
Help the people down the block.
If that were your audience, you'd be over the radar. You are actually behaving what you are passionate about.
And I've said this really quickly. There are businesses that people covet that they almost don't want to tell us about. Golden Harvest in Old Town is one of those places here in Lansing. If you're not familiar, it's a fantastic breakfast place. They actually were one of the few businesses that turned us down to be on the show because they didn't want to improve. They didn't want to get more busy than they already are. So I think one of the things is that there are people that don't want to share their little out-of-the-way place because they don't want it to get busier.
Yeah, we had one hamburger place, Mott's Hamburgers, downtown Detroit. I called him. I said, "You want to be on the show? We're doing a thing about classic little white slider diners." And he goes, "Listen, I've seen your show. I love it. I don't want to be on the show." I'm like, "What?" He said, "I already have more business than I could possibly handle. If I go on your show, I'm going to get overrun." And I can hear this woman in the background screaming and yelling. And I finally said to him, "Who's the lady in the background yelling?" He goes, "That's my wife. She loves your show, and she wants me to do this show." And I'm like, I said, "Go talk to your wife. I'll call you back." So I call him back 5 minutes later. He goes, "I'll do the show."
Page 201 for Mott's Hamburger.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we have covered so much ground.
I know.
Let's
keep going.
Let's go
for 3 episodes.
Honestly, about 3 questions in, I was like, "Oh, this is definitely a 2-parter." But thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
So we can visit you at utrmichigan.com. And where else can we see or connect with you guys?
Instagram. We're on Snapchat for the kids out there. We're on Twitter and Facebook. That's all we're on right now. And then, subscribe to our blog, subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that all from the website.
Send me an email. I'll answer it.
Ding. Ding.
Well, thanks, guys. We really appreciate your time, and we've learned so much today.
Thanks. We did too.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
These guys have the greatest stories.
Isn't it amazing? The time went so fast, and the lessons were frequent, yet we can really distill them down to some real key things. And Misty, one of the lessons that I learned in this podcast is how really important it is that we always work at keeping it simple.
And from that, you get the greatest stories, the greatest things, and the greatest lessons. And just like Tom said, it doesn't have to be perfect. They're not slick. I would kind of argue that they are pretty slick. I mean, I think they've got it going on. And if you see the show, you'd probably tend to agree with me. But I know what they mean. They're just real people. They're not there trying to put this perfect polish on it. But audiences connect with the fact that it's real people covering real things.
I think in the beginning stages of anything, people are maybe a little uncomfortable or a little awkward with what they're doing. But they made a quote, Misty, in this episode that I think I heard, and I want to bounce this off of you. I'm pretty sure they said they were proud to be good at reinvention. And I believe the reason they said that is because they have seen and witnessed and participated and watched enough reinvention going on and reported on enough stories that they really get it. And they're really now trying to promote it. And to be able to say, I'm good at something means you really do believe it.
I think so. A couple of times while we were talking to them, I want to just bottle them up and let them out every time we talk to somebody new about reinvention, because it's so nice to hear somebody that gets it, that compare it back to what you're trying to explain to other people. They're living it.
I think that's absolutely right. And because they're living it, they are very comfortable kind of looking out over the horizon and asking what's next. So they're always working on what's the next story, what's the next point of interest that we ought to be reporting on. And I think in any good reinvention focus, some of it is the core of what you are working on, and most of it is on where you're going and how you're going to get there, and the what's next part that they, I think, really focus on.
Here's what's so cool about that. They've really incorporated their audience, their customer base, into defining that for them, getting new show ideas, really listening to the conversation that they said happens on social media almost without them. Their audience is beginning to own whatever they put out there, and then the dialogue that happens in the thread, they don't even need to be part of anymore. Yeah, they're there to monitor it, but what the people are getting out of it, connecting with one another, is really incredible.
So, Misty, here's the lesson for any executive that's listening to this. If you're struggling trying to understand what your next reinvention is, that means you're not listening to your customers enough.
Absolutely.
That if you're struggling trying to understand what you should be doing, that's one of the very big keys to us that says you're probably internal within your business too much, because as we've learned from both Jim and Tom, if you're out in the marketplace enough and are listening, you will have more stories than you'll ever know what to do with.
Right, that list. And it was funny when they were saying that. I have a list for Pure Reinvention, for podcast ideas, for blog ideas, for interview guests, and they're on my cell phone. And I just keep these notes going. But there's so many times that stuff like that hits me. And I really connected with what they were saying about that. There's always opportunity to learn and get new ideas out there if you're tuned in and listening.
So if we're not getting enough good ideas for a project that we're working on, there's a very strong likelihood you're not out in your marketplace, colliding with your customers, listening to their needs, and understanding what they're telling you is your what's next.
Very true. So if you guys want to talk to us about what's next in your world, share it with us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at hello@purereinvention.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Misty, let me give you just a little plug for a what's next that's coming for Pure Reinvention. You know
yes.
that we've been working on some of our educational executive development opportunities. Very quickly, we're going to be starting to share what we're planning for May and what some of that content looks like, and a special offer for those that are interested in a Pure Reinvention executive development opportunity. Stay tuned.
And that'll be learning from the city of Detroit. So if you were kind of interested in what these guys were explaining and want to see some of that on the ground and how you can translate that into your life and creating a reinvention lifestyle in your career or in your personal world, we're here to help you define that.
Real-time, immersive learning laboratory. Stay tuned.
So if you're ready to make a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.